Will West Virginia's offense be better under Rich Rodriguez than it was under Neil Brown? I think the obvious answer is yes. And in this episode of Couz's Corner, I'm going to explain why. Now, some of these answers might be obvious to you, but we're going to dig a little deeper. We're actually going to get into the numbers comparing these two coaches and their past stops as head coach. So stick around and we'll do that right now. What is up, and welcome into this episode of Couz's Corner, your home for top shelf content around West Virginia Mountaineer sports. Let's go ahead and dive into this episode. Yes, Rich Rod will have West Virginia's offense improved, in my opinion. They will be better than they were under Neil Brown. And I think you will see that difference in year one. I don't think it'll take long. A couple obvious reasons before we dive into comparing the two coaches. A, Rich Rod just runs a faster paced, up-tempo offense. They may run up to 90 to 100 snaps a game. Much faster than what Neil Brown was doing. Neil Brown was doing more. Yes, they would do some no-huddle stuff, but they took longer to snap the football. Some of that, I think, was because they wanted to keep the defense off the field, but that doesn't stop Rich Rodriguez. He's going to go after it. He's going to go fast, regardless of, and he expects the defense to step up and play. He's not playing not to lose, and I think a lot of times that's what Neil Brown was a little bit guilty of. Overthinking it a little bit, playing not to lose, being a little too conservative. Rich Rodriguez is not going to do that, folks. We've seen it throughout his history. He's not going to play not to lose. He's going to play to win. He's going to try to put his foot on the gas, keep it there, and when he gets you down, he's going to try to put his foot on your neck. Okay? Now, and by the way, he's going to do it running the football. I'm not saying Neil Brown didn't want to run the football, but he's just going to do it. And then when you look at, but Rodriguez is going to do it on a higher percentage. And just when you look at Rich Rod's pedigree, I mean, he's an offensive guru. I wouldn't call Neil Brown a guru in it. Now, I'm not saying Neil Brown's a bad offensive coach by any means. I think he had good stints as offensive coordinator at multiple stops. When you look at his numbers at Troy, which we'll talk about later, he put up good numbers there. And there were some positive moments at West Virginia as well, offensively. But just overall, Rich Rodriguez is known as one of the founders, if not the godfather, of the spread zone read offense. Neil Brown can't say that. Neil Brown's an air raid guy, another form of spread offense, but I wouldn't consider him a guru. He's learned from some great coaches like Mike Leach, Hal Mummy, and others, but I wouldn't consider him a guru. Rich Rod, he was the guy people were going to about offense, not the other way around. So I think Rich Rod is just a better, I just think he has a better background as an offensive coach. Just my opinion. But here's where I really think the rubber meets the road. And I think it's when you dig into the numbers. Now, I know that you have to put context around these numbers. I get it. Neil Brown's tenure at West Virginia was several years later than what Rich Rod's tenure was at Arizona, which we're going to look at. NIL came into play. The portal came into play during his tenure. I get all that. But I think when you look at the early years of their career at those stops, I think there are some similarities, and we're going to talk about that. We're going to compare the numbers. We're also going to compare the numbers of their stints at Jacksonville State and Troy. A lot of similarities. Now, we're not going to take a look at Rich Rod's first run at West Virginia. I think it's too obvious there. He obviously recruited great players with Pat White, Noel Devine, Steve Slayton, Owen Schmidt. Go on down the list. 3 historic seasons. We don't need to recap it, rehash it. We all know it. Neil Brown has never even come close to matching that, at least not at the Power 4 level. He did it at Troy with 3 10-win seasons, but it's not the same. Rich Rod's teams were winning BCS bowl games, right, against teams like Georgia and Oklahoma, blue blood programs, because in large part, not entirely, but in large part due to his high-octane offense. I'm going to do a separate episode, hopefully, talking about their defensive history, comparing the two. But right now, we're talking about offense. And for those of you listening on podcast, I am going to show some numbers up on the screen as we compare the eras of Rich Rod versus Neil Brown during their most recent tenures. In Neil Brown's case, his only tenure, his only run as a Power 4 coach. Okay? Now, for those of you watching, you can obviously see the numbers on the screen. When you look at, and I know there's a typo there. It says Neal Brown was at West Virginia from 2019 to 2018. Obviously, typo, it was 2019 to 2024. But when you look at his tenure there, Neal Brown averaged, this is an average now, he averaged 27.25 points a game during his tenure. Also averaged 378.5 yards a game during that 6-year stretch. Rich Rodriguez at Arizona from 2012 to 2017, which coincidentally also a 6-year run. In a power conference in the Pac-12, playing the likes of Oregon, Washington, USC, UCLA at that time. Rich Rod averaged 34.95 points a game and 463.13 yards a game. He averaged over 7 points a game more during his 6-year stretch at Arizona. Only one time, only one season did Rich Rod ever average less than 30 points a game. That was the next to last season when they averaged 24.8 in 2016. But they averaged over his whole tenure, they averaged 34.95 points. Huge difference. And the reason I think this difference will start in year one, when you look back at Rich Rod and when he had his first year at schools, his offenses always started out humming. Maybe with the exception of West Virginia in 2001 when they had some struggles. But outside of that, I mean, for example, his first year at Arizona, one of the best years they had offensively. They averaged 38.2 points a game in 2012 and 518.8 yards a game. Coincidentally, when you look at Neal Brown's first year at West Virginia in 2019, he averaged 20.58 points a game. So not even 21 points a game. We all remember the offense struggling that year because he decided to go with a young offensive line. And they only averaged 309.8 yards a game. So barely broke 300 yards a game and barely broke 20 points a game. Huge, drastic difference from what Rich Rod did in year one at Arizona. So I think that's, again, I know these numbers, there has to be context put around them, but I still think it's a good indicator of what we couldn't possibly expect. We're going to take a look at their tenures at Group of 5 schools, which are also similar. But before we do that, I want to give a shout out to our channel sponsors. First, let's hear from the fine folks over at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner, attorneys at law. Since 1931, the attorneys at Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner have been the voice for victims who have suffered serious injury or death. They have a fierce passion for truth and justice and a sincere compassion for those who have been wronged by others. Whether you have been in a car accident or fighting with an insurance company, or you or a loved one has suffered serious injury or death due to medical negligence, we will ensure your voice is heard loud and clear. Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner will ensure there is justice for all West Virginians because we are your lawyer, your voice. Visit us at yourlawyeryourvoice.com. Also want to give a shout out to the fine folks over at Appalachia Digital, the folks who designed our brand new website over at wvsportschat.com. They did a fantastic job over there. If you want a brand new website or you need your website to get found more on Google, found easier on Google, go to appalachiadigital.com/Couz and find the good folks over at Appalachia Digital. They will take care of your needs and they will design you an awesome website just like the one they did for me. So go check them out again, appalachiadigital.com/Couz, and let them know Couz sent you. Now, let's go ahead and dive back in to the content. When you look at the two tenures of these coaches, Rich Rodriguez versus Neal Brown, in their years coaching G5 schools. Now, I'm not looking at Rich Rod's first year at Jacksonville State because they were at the FCS level. We're looking only when they were in the FBS. So he spent 2 years at Jacksonville State in the FBS, 23 and 24. Neal Brown was at Troy from 2015 to 2018, so a slightly longer tenure, but still, we have comparable sample sizes here. Neal Brown's tenure at Troy was actually good offensively. They averaged 30.95 points a game and 390.3 yards per game. So not bad. Not bad at all. But still not as good as Rich Rod in his time at Jacksonville State. His time at Jacksonville State, they averaged 33.1 points a game during their 2 years in the FBS and 415.1 yards per game. And Rich Rod did this his first season at Jacksonville State, or his first year in the FBS, which would have been 2023. He still had FCS players for the most part on his roster. They still went out and put up over 300, nearly 400 yards a game and 30 points a game with FCS level talent. Because A, he can get the most out of that talent, and he had them performing at an FBS level. B, he's probably a really good recruiter, and a lot of those guys might have been better than FCS players. And 3, he's just a heck of a coach, especially offensively. He's one of the best in the game. And it shows every time he gets on the sidelines. Neil Brown won 10 games 3 years in a row at Troy with those numbers. Yet Rich Rod's offenses were even that much better. About 2 whole points a game better and 125 yards per game better, basically. Phenomenal. At the G5 level, one in the Sun Belt, one in Conference USA. Pretty comparable if you ask me. And here's the thing too. Rich Rod, those 2 years he spent at Jacksonville State were during the NIL and transfer portal eras. So he was having to rebuild his roster every year, pretty much, because his best players were leaving and going to bigger schools in a lot of cases. So doing this in the portal and in NIL era is not new to him. Now, it will be new to him to do it at the Power 4 level. But doing it in this era will not be new to him. And I don't think that should be lost on anybody. He knows what it's like to rebuild a roster. And we've all seen how he can evaluate talent. We've all seen how he can develop talent. Why should that change now? Now, again, I could be completely wrong, and this offense could go to hell in a handbasket. But I just don't see it. The track record is there for West Virginia's offense to be really good. Now, there's huge questions around the offensive line, but if they can get that together, which I have confidence that they will, they're going to put up big numbers. That's just the nature of Rich Rod's offenses. Expect explosiveness, a lot of points and a lot of yards, and to go extremely fast. I want to hear your thoughts in the comments section, though. Do you think Rich Rod will put up big numbers like he is accustomed to doing in his career? And do you think West Virginia will take a step up offensively? I want to hear your thoughts in the comment section. Let me know. If you're watching this or listening to this on podcast, drop me a note. Let me know what you think about this episode and whether you think West Virginia's offense will be much improved under Coach Rich Rodriguez. Also, if you're listening on podcast, please leave us a 5-star rating. We would very much appreciate it. And be sure to give us a follow on your favorite podcast platform. If you're watching on YouTube, thumbs ups, the like button below, comments, and subscriptions all help, and those are all free and easy. If you want to support me financially, you can do that easily too, and it's an inexpensive way to do it. Hit the join button over at my channel homepage. Some of you may even see a join button below this video on your device. When you hit that button, it'll explain the perks of the 2 membership levels I have, one of which includes random shout-outs. The random shout-outs of this show are T. Jinx 048, H. Bar Farkle, Cody Cutright, Caleb Davis, and Kenny Evans. Thank you all for your financial support here on the channel. Also want to give another quick thank you to my sponsors, Katz, Cantor, Stone Street, and Buckner Attorneys at Law and Appalachia Digital. Thank you for tuning into this episode. Hope the rest of your day's top shelf. God bless you, and Q Country Roads.